Great, nice to meet you all. I guess we'll get started since it's 10:33, so I'm just going to assume that we're good and go with it. But now that you all introduce yourself to me, I guess I should probably do the same. Hello, my name is Tim Smith. I am a recent graduate from the University of Valley Forge, right in Phoenixville, PA. So I went to school with Sheridan. We were on the same worship teams and everything, so that was great. I just graduated with my ministry leadership degree and a minor in music technology. But I couldn't quite escape from the school after I was done. I'm currently back at Valley Forge right now, working at the school full-time in their development office, as well as studying for my master's in organizational leadership. I guess just to give some of my basic background for worship experience, I've been in worship ministry my entire life, from like 6th grade on, but a lot of my experience came in through Valley Forge. I served on their traveling ministry team called Cohesion for 3 years as their bass guitarist and music director. So was just an incredible opportunity to be able to go and minister to youth and to different churches all over the region. And that's where a lot of my experience came from as a music director and as just as a musician. But it also was just like this incredible opportunity of being able to minister and being able to learn how to just minister to the gospel and bring that hope to whoever we came in contact with. So that's something that I love to do. But while traveling and touring was like this huge, amazing thing, and it was so much fun, and I loved it, my heart really is about serving and about resourcing the local church, being able to do stuff like this. So I'm really excited to be with you all today. This is going to be great. But that's enough about me. You didn't all come here to hear me talk about my life story for the entire time. So we're talking about using tracks in worship today. And to get the overall picture of what we're talking about, we're going to be talking about why do we use tracks in worship, different applications that we use to run tracks. We're talking about running loops and building sets. I'm going to be using Ableton Live, but a lot of the different concepts that I'm going to be talking about do apply to other applications as well. So it's all universal. It might seem crazy at first, but don't worry, everything's going to be okay. And then there'll be room for questions at the end as well. So I guess just as a quick clarification, I guess just to see a show of hands in the room, how familiar are we with loops and tracks and stuff like that? Is this stuff that we've used before? If anybody has never used a loop track in their life, you raise your hand. All right, awesome. And that's totally okay. I'm glad you're all here for that. I guess just to give just a basic idea of what tracks are. Tracks consist of 3 different things. This is one of the programs that we use for running click and loop. So what I mean by tracks is that there are clicks, which is basically your metronome keeping everyone in time, your tracks, which is any instruments that are being played, and then your guide, which is kind of like that voice in your that tells you, hey, go here, hey, go here. So I guess just to give a exactly. Just to give a quick example, just so everyone's kind of on the same page, I'm just going to play the start of this loop and just go from there.
Intro, 3, 4. Intro, 3, 4.
So basically, you're hearing with the
Intro,
loop, all the instruments are your loop, the loop part. The guide is telling everyone to go. This is like
Intro, 3,
the
4.
longest intro in humanity, so it's a lot of like saying, hey, we're still in intro, we're still here. And then finally the click, which is just that. Just keeping everyone in time and making sure that you're all still on the loop. So that's basically what using loops are. And when I say tracks, that's kind of what I mean. I'm going to be saying loops a lot. I usually don't say tracks, I say loops. So whenever I say loops or tracks, it's all synonymous. It all means the same thing in the end. So I guess just to start off with, why do we use tracks in worship? This is, I know this can be such a controversial thing. Just like, why do we use loops in church? Why is it necessary? What, do we need it at all? What's the point? And I kind of want to, I know that there might be some skeptics in the room being like, I don't don't know about this. This might be a little bit weird to use. And then there's all the people that are just like, no, please give me reasons to use this. Please just tell me, how do I incorporate this into my church? What do I do? So I'm here to hopefully answer some of those questions, just to get us all on the same page and just kind of just to get an understanding of what loops do. So the first question that's so commonly asked is, do we actually need loops in worship? Is it necessary? No. Okay, I got more mhms than I was expecting, so that's good. So before you all leave the room, for the people being like, then why am I here? Let me explain. I think, oh my goodness, Pastor Dan did such a great job explaining what worship is this morning, right? And I had my own definition here. I'm just like, I feel like he just explained everything that I wanted to. But just to talk about what is worship, if you take the word worship, it really gets down to the term worthship. It's the natural response to an encounter with God, a response to his great worth, his great love for us, his beauty, and his grace. And that is why we worship. And one of my favorite examples comes from the story of Paul and Silas when they're in prison. And they're in the worst of circumstances. Talk about the desert. They're literally just like in a jail cell, probably just like not even remotely treated well, in a miserable state. But what were they doing? They were worshiping. And they were just responding to, hey, we know who our God is, and we're so thankful for who he is anyway, despite our circumstances, despite anything going on. And the response to that was the earth shaking, chains falling, captives being set free, and a jailer being brought to Christ. And I just think that it's so beautiful, such a beautiful picture of what worship is and what God can do through that for us. And they did that without a loop. They did that without any instruments, any huge productions or anything like that. They didn't have this state-of-the-art sound system. They probably were terrible singers, you don't know. But the bottom line is loops are not mandatory for your worship experience, but that doesn't mean that you can't use them. So I guess just to explain, even though they're not mandatory, that they can be used and can be used in amazing ways. It's a tool that can be used to enhance your worship experience and to just bring about a lot of things that'll help grow your teams and be able to help just your entire congregation be able to enter in easier. And we'll get into that in a second. So I guess just to give one of my favorite quotes from before we move on to more practical things, I did want to give just the heart behind it at first. When we're talking about utilizing the blessings that we have with modern technology in worship, Henry Seeley is a pastor at the Belonging Co. Some of you might have heard that church. It's in Nashville. And when talking about production elements in worship, which I definitely think that tracks count as a production element in worship, this is what he says. After listing a bunch of creative leads at his church, he says, "These people have incredible gifts, but they also understand everything they do is about connecting people to God through the gifts God has placed on their lives. Our house desires encounter over entertainment, intimacy over industry, presence over presentation, people over position, and most of all, Jesus over everything." So as we go into the rest of this summer, I really just want to just keep in mind why we're doing this, that we're doing it to glorify the King of Kings and to be able to use these tools to be able to bring people closer to him. So yeah, onto some more practical reasons to use tracks. I would say the main reason to use tracks is to help supplement your worship team and help bring out the best in the people that you have. So supplementing is just, in other words, it's just something that helps. It's something that helps build up your team, something that helps enhance the experience that your musicians on stage and your congregation off the stage are having. And that happens in a couple of ways. The first way is with band cohesion. We talked about metronomes, guides in the beginning, and it keeps everyone on track where they're going. It keeps everyone on track of where, there's a sense of comfort that comes from, okay, I know exactly what's going to happen and where to go. And there's no, because you have these clicks and guides, there's no rapidly changing tempos. There is no like, you don't have that drummer who suddenly increases by like 15 BPM every measure and just like, oh, this is stressing me out. We've all been there, I understand. So this kind of just helps alleviate some of that stress. And I would say in the end that increased cohesion on your team, knowing where you're going, knowing where you're headed, having a metronome keep you on the same BPM leads to greater unity on your team, leads to less distractions, more confidence, and being to inspire confidence on your team, which is something that's so undervalued and something that's really important, inspiring confidence on your team. And more freedom, actually, to be able to move wherever the spirit leads. There's this common misconception with loops that it's like, oh man, this is going to hinder the Holy Spirit moving. This is going to, we're going to be stuck in a box. And in a lot of cases, this is true. However, there are ways to use loops where this is not a problem at all. And there are ways to use loops that you're able to, wherever, if you feel the Lord saying, hey, I really want to repeat that bridge again, you get to be able to use the loop to be able to head in that direction instead of instead of having your team be a slave to the loop, you get to, the loops are used to be able to serve you and your team and to help you all be the best that you can be. So, and also on top of that, my notes are not the same on here as on here, so that's good. To help integrate novice players without causing distractions. Y'all, like those moments where you have that new player on the team where it's just like, okay, I really want to have you on the team. I love your heart. This is great. But it's definitely going to be distracting when you play the wrong chords. Having the loop and all the instruments in the house while you're playing them, what I mean by house is the speakers going out. When you have those, it not only allows you to increase your opportunities for volunteers to grow and to be able to still be a part of the team and to get more comfortable and confident, but at the same time, it also, having tracks prevents any distractions that the congregation might be like, oh, that was a little rough there. So it just kind of helps smooth things over a little bit. Confidence is definitely key, especially when recruiting new musicians. So being able to kind of have loops in that way helps a ton. So reasons to not use tracks. There are a few reasons to not use tracks. If your reason is because everyone else is doing it, that's just to be frank, a terrible reason to do it. Just because everyone else is doesn't mean that you should. Having vision for your worship ministry and where it's heading is something that's super important, and knowing your why behind why you're incorporating these things is really important, not only for you, but for presenting it to your team, presenting new things to your team, presenting it to your pastoral leadership whenever it's something new. Know your why, and the reason should not be because everyone else is doing it. Another reason, if you're planning on using them as a crutch to hold up your entire worship ministry, that's something that so many people fall into the temptation of doing because, wow, I have all these perfect sounding instruments. This is great. And then you want to keep on relying on that crutch, keep on leaning on that crutch. When you use a crutch, it's meant to be something temporary, meant to help heal and strengthen in the process of someone with a broken bone. And kind of the same thing is for loops. It's not a perfect analogy because you could still use loops, but as long as you don't make it a crutch that's halting the progress of your team, that's something that's really important. In short, don't replace your musicians with a computer. As worship leaders, it's our job not only to lead others into the presence of God, but also to disciple and to come alongside all the people that you're working with and to help them grow in the role that they have been placed in. So if you use loops as a crutch 100% of the time, you're going to stunt the growth of the people in your ministry, which is something that that God calls us to do, to help just grow and disciple and help people grow. And finally, if your context doesn't fit having them, we all come from different churches, we all come from different backgrounds, and there are definitely just some instances where having a loop might be not fitting for your context. Knowing your context is something that is just so important, and that's something that I have here. Know your context. Know the things to keep in mind is the size of your church, your volunteers, if you know your volunteers and being like, yeah, I can teach these people these things, and they have the time and the resources to do it, by all means, introduce tracks. Keep in mind your current technology. If you don't have in-ears, an in-ear system, basically that's when you have earbuds that go to your ears and then you can hear everything going on, and kind of an alternative to floor wedges, and having those on the floor just amplify the sound up to you. If you don't have in-ears, I definitely would not recommend using loops, because if you're gonna have a metronome coming through the floor wedges, people are going to be so confused and just being like, oh, what's happening? What's going on? So having an awareness of your technology is really important. Your own personal time. Loops and learning how to use them is an investment, not only in resources, but in like monetary resources, but in your own personal time. Some of the things that we're going to be going over, some of the programs that we're going to be going over are definitely is a learning curve to them, and you want to make sure that you have the time to be able to invest into those things, and that's something that's just really important. And then of course your budget. If you don't have the money for it, probably shouldn't do it. So in short, use the resources that God has given you to the best of your ability. Use what you have. Of course, find ways to grow, but only if you're capable of doing it. If you don't have the volunteers or technology or time or budget, use what you have. I would just highly encourage you guys to just use the resources that you have and do it with excellence to the best of your ability. And then eventually, as you continue to grow, be able to incorporate these things. So yeah, know your context. It's super, super important. I guess just a quick story about context. I was talking to a pastor about this seminar and being like, what do I talk about? What do I do? What do people want to know? And she told me a story of this church that definitely did not have the proper resources and didn't know their context very well. Their worship team consisted of a worship leader with a guitar and a cajon player.
Oh,
and
okay.
That's it. And they used just picture this, like they used loops, but not just like certain parts of the loop. I'm talking about every single instrument on here. So it's just, you can imagine how uncomfortable and weird that must have been. And just like having these like 5 electric guitars, 5 synths, all these different things, with just like a dude just sitting at a cajon and a person singing. And in some cases that works, but in the majority of the time, like knowing the size of your church, the people that you have on your team, when considering these things is probably the most important thing that you can do. And going for those elements out of pride, being like, no, we need to do this. This will advance us. We need to do it because everyone else is doing it. There's so many of those thoughts that go through your head, but in the end, if you don't know your context, it could really actually be a detriment to you and your worship ministry instead of being something that helps progress. So, know your context. I can't say that enough. Know exactly your context and be aware and honest about it. So, moving on to some applications for running tracks. I'm going to be going through a couple of different options. All of these options are ones that I've used during my time in worship ministry at some point or another. And I can highly recommend all of these depending on your context and what you need. So we're going to start at kind of like a lower cost option and keep on moving up from there. So the first option is just any metronome app from an iPhone. It might be like, why on earth would we do that? But if you really need a metronome, it works. It totally works. My favorite app is the Tempo app. This one specifically called Metronome with Setlist. It's just a really cool app that allows you to just work with a bunch of different parameters. It allows you to set your beats per minute. You can tap your tempo in if you don't have an exact tempo. You can change the time signature there at the bottom. You can change your subdivisions. So instead of having quarter notes, you can make it eighth notes or something like that, depending on what you want to do. And what's really cool about this one is that there's actually a setlist feature. So if you're having like 4 or 5 songs for an entire set and just want click, you can set the BPMs and the time signatures all in a line to be able to have all the songs on the fly instead of just having your drummer like frantically while keeping time, just like changing the BPM on the side. It allows you to be able to have a lot of flexibility with your metronomes, and it only costs $2.99, so it doesn't break the bank either. So this is a really good option. It doesn't run instrumental loops and instrumental tracks, but if you just want a solid metronome for a really low cost, this is a really great option. The second options are iPad apps. So Loop Community Prime and Multitracks.com Playback are two of the main iPad apps that are used. The top one right there is Playback, and the bottom one is Loop Community Prime. Both of these are really awesome for their own respective reasons. They obviously look very different, but in the end, they accomplish a lot of the same things. So moving to Loop Community Prime first. Loop Community Prime is, sorry, I got lost. So this is the interface for Loop Community Prime. The main things that you would want to see is that your song tracks are on top. All of the instruments for loops are right here. So on here, it's a little bit smaller to read, but like acoustic guitar is there, all your electric guitars are here, bass is there. So all your tracks are really easily accessible, and these are all volume levels too. So you can change the different volumes depending on what you want and what you don't want. And then you can just mute them all together by hitting the on button and it turns off. Right here is your set window. So I just have one track in there, but you can incorporate as many songs as you want into there, and it's just really easy to access. Right here is your play, stop button, stuff like that, and master volume. So this is an option that I have personally used for a long time, and it's great. Back at the time that I used it, there was definitely a lot of bugs with it, so I will give that warning, but it was also 2018, so a couple years later, it definitely has a bunch of really cool options. And I guess just one note as well, something that I meant to address before is buying your tracks. Buying your tracks can come from a couple of different places. Each website that I'm mentioning, Loop Community's Prime, loopcommunity.com is where this app comes from. You can buy all your tracks from there. Any tracks that are specifically for the app cost only $12, so it's not that expensive. If you get tracks that you can download individually, it costs a little bit more. And what I mean by that is that if you download the tracks from this specific website, and if you download the tracks from the specific website, and you get an entire folder with all of the different part tracks in it that you can click and drag into any other software that you want. It costs a little bit more, but it also allows you, if you want to move ahead in the future, to be able to use them in different applications, not just this one. If you buy specifically from the app, it costs less money, but then you can't use it outside of that app. So it's kind of like a question of long-term investment versus short-term savings. So it just depends on what you really want to do. Something really cool with Prime specifically is that you can customize arrangements, and this is what I meant by being able to jump to different parts of your arrangement. So if we go to Prime for a second, if we go to the beginning of the song,
Intro, 3, 4.
and you're just sitting here being like, we talked about this intro before, it's like 1,000 years long. I just want to get to the verse.
Intro, 3, 4.
So basically what you can do, if you see all of these subdivisions here, these are all the different parts of the track, and if you program them, which is a really easy process to do, you can eventually jump parts. So let's go and do the verse now.
4.
So that allows you to be able to, once again, have the loop serve you instead of the other way around. If you want to repeat the verse, it goes back. So that's when we, like, in terms of spontaneity and being able to do all of those things, this is like a really easy way to be able to do that. So Loop Community Prime is probably one of my favorite ways to be able to really easily be able to customize arrangements. So it's a really great option. And then the other option is multi-track playback. It's basic in a lot of ways. It's the same thing. It's a little bit different. But so like instead of your play buttons up here, all your tracks that you have, as opposed to like the set list going down that was on Prime, it's all across. Everything is across, which might be a little bit hard to use, but it actually is really nice once you get used to it. All of your volume faders for all the instruments are here, and then you have your tracks here. So basically the same thing as Prime when it comes to jumping around in your arrangement. The only difference, so basically you would double tap the section that you want to go to, and then it'll jump right there. And what's also cool is that if you're going through a specific part, like right now, the playhead is in the instrumental, it's playing through the instrumental. If you just want to repeat it once, all you need to do is hit this loop once button, and it'll loop right back to the instrumental. If you want to loop that instrumental like 50 times, if you're in that altar call moment where it's just like, we're just going to play the same 4 chords and keep on going over and over again, hit the infinite loop button, and then it'll keep on looping this specific section over and over again. So it's a really easy system to use. It's definitely different than Prime, but a lot of it in the end accomplishes the same thing. One thing to note about a main difference between these two apps, if you have loops already that you want to customize, that like you made yourself or something like that, when you download, you can download them to both applications, but the main difference is that Loop Community is really easy to make these arrangement markers, and I can show you guys how to do that in a bit. But Playback, this one, doesn't have that option. You have to go on the website and input time codes for different parts of the song, and that could take a lot longer period of time. So it really depends on what you want to do. If you like this layout better, it's a small price to pay, but at the same time, this app is really powerful in what it does, and I love using it. So both are really great options for iPad apps. Mostly they run around the same price, so it really comes down to personal preference. And then finally, we're going to talk about Ableton Live for a second. Ableton Live is kind of a beast of a program. It's definitely a lot, but it's also one of the most powerful applications that you can use. So I'm just going to pull up a typical Ableton session. This is Ableton. So Ableton is kind of like the industry standard for running click and loops. These are what Bethel, Elevation, Hillsong, all of them use this application for running tracks. It's a really powerful software that allows a lot of flexibility and a lot of customization with what you want specifically for a part. In comparison to the iPad apps, I have never had one issue of this application crashing. I have had that happen with the iPad apps. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Like, this might look kind of gargantuan at first and be like, oh my goodness, Tim, what did you just bring me into? But at the same time, it is by far the most reliable system that I use. So there are 2 different modes with Ableton. This one is called Arrangement View. So it's kind of what you would expect from the other applications. It goes from left to right. When I start at the beginning, if it'll let me. Oh no, it's not letting me. Oh, that'll do it. So
1, 2.
You'll notice that a lot of these things are kind of similar to the other iPad apps, but just in a different program. But the flexibility is really nice because you have these markers up here. And if you want to repeat the intro, okay, repeat the intro, everyone. And then it'll loop back. So you have a lot of flexibility with your parts and where you want to go. Arrangement view is really nice because you can see everything really clear, but it definitely is a pretty hefty process to program from the back end. But once you get there, it takes you like, I don't know, 10 minutes or so to be able to get a complete set. But that's only one view for Ableton. The second view is called Session View. Session View is the one that I actually personally use for Ableton whenever I run tracks live. it'll look very different. So basically, it's from a top-down perspective this time, where the song starts at the top.
2, 1, 2.
And then it kind of
3,
works its way down
4.
instead. And then you have all of your parts of the track listed.
Intro.
So if you want to repeat the intro, you can go back to the top and do that. So it's just kind of the same, a different way to get to the same goal in the end. It definitely takes a lot of brain power and energy, but once you get there, the reliability of this software, I think, is unmatched. And it allows you to do a lot of different things that you wouldn't be able to do in other programs. So yeah, that's kind of like the basic overview of all of the different ways that you can use tracks and different applications that you can use. So at first I was going to go into kind of this kind of exercise of running loops and building sets in Ableton, but I actually kind of want to make this an open Q&A. I know I've just been blabbering and it's a lot of information, and so I kind of want to hear from you guys. Do you have any questions? Is there anything that you specifically would want to see or want to know? And we can kind of go from there. Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously these are, I'm assuming they're probably like monthly subscriptions, or are they, because we at our church, there's a little resistance to tracks, and
Sure.
I have to, and it's not because everybody's doing it. My first opportunity I actually got to hear tracks was here, when I did a couple encounter services here with Josh.
Okay.
And I heard Josh talk about it, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. But when you get a bunch of musicians together, whether they play together or not, it helps tighten the group up, and like you said, it frees everybody up to focus on worshiping. And again, like I thought it was going to feel like resistance for me at that point. But so then I kind of brought it back to our team, and I said, hey, I just experienced this. You know, here's kind of what you're going to hear. And everybody's face was like,
Yep.
Yeah.
I understand completely.
Yeah. And you know, I completely understand it, because nobody likes change. But we can't grow if we stay in the same season. So yeah, when we're in new season, we have to develop and create new strategies and new that's what I'm looking for, new patterns.
Sure.
So with this, with the tracks and everything, we're slowly turning a corner. But now it's the budgets.
Sure.
Which are going to be, you know, this tech is not a cheap budget.
No.
Worship in tech is not a cheap budget. Not that it outweighs any other ministry, but like, are these, so like you said, like paying for tracks or like, is it like monthly subscriptions? And I know each one varies probably on your package, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it really depends. Loop Community and Multitracks, those two apps tend to run along the same prices.
Okay.
And it includes cloud storage to store your loops online, ability to use Setlist. You actually have to pay more sometimes to get the jumping around feature in your arrangement, and pay a little bit more, which I think both apps actually have that, which is might be a problem, but at the same time, it might be a worth it investment in the end. So Loop Community and Multitracks are subscriptions based off of what you want. I think the maximum that you'll be paying is around $50 a month, depending. But on top of that, you have to keep in mind paying for tracks as well.
Right, yep.
One interesting thing that Playback has is that they have a monthly rental program that if, depending on how many loops you use per month, you can rent X amount of loops. So for, I want to say it starts at around, goodness, I want to say 50, which is definitely a bit of a hefty price at first when you think about it, but you get to download, I don't remember the exact number of loops off the top of my head, but you get to rent a decent amount of loops that you can use in your services, and then you can rent them, return the rental, and then rent new ones the next month. So I think in the long run, when you're doing so many songs in a week, in a given week, it could be worth it just renting them, and it helps save some money. So that's something that might be worth looking into for you. But full, depending on the type of tracks that you get, if you get tracks that are built into the program specifically, it'll tend to cost less. I know Multitracks, I believe it costs $15. Don't quote me on that. I'm trying to remember the numbers right now. Actually, I might have them somewhere in my notes. But either way, it's definitely oh, here we are. For Multitracks Playback, you can buy tracks specifically for the app for $29. But then you can buy track files that can be transferred to other programs for $35. So it's not the biggest jump in price, and it might be worth paying the extra if you want to switch programs at some point. But at the same time, if you want to save some money at first and you're confident that you're going to be using the app that you have, it could be worth saving some pennies there. Ableton is a bit different. Ableton is not a subscription. Ableton costs for there's intro, standard, and I forget what the top tier is, but there's a top tier of it. Intro costs, I want to say, $100. But I would highly recommend not using it because you can only use a certain amount of tracks, and in the end you would probably be able to get like half a song in if you do it that way. Meanwhile, with standard's the one that I use. Standard's the one that I would recommend to people. That costs $500, but you're not paying a monthly subscription for it, so that's something that's a bit different.
Annual?
No, it's one set rate.
It's a once and done, $500.
Yep.
That you have your.
Yeah. So it's not a subscription. It's just one-time thing. And if you buy it, like Ableton, I run Ableton 10. The upgrade to Ableton, Ableton 11 just came out, I want to say like 2 weeks ago. And they allow you to upgrade for free. So it's not like other programs like Pro Tools where they force you whenever they come out with an update being like, you need to pay us more money to upgrade our program. So that's something that's nice. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
For the most part? Yes.
Well, I was starting to get to know Loop Community, and I purchased some tracks.
Yeah.
I definitely have some pushback from especially my drummer. I guess he just hates the click.
Sure.
And I'm not sure how to help him through that, hold his hand through that. The other thing is, I don't pay any kind of subscription to Loop Community. I just purchase tracks, and you pay for the track, and then that's it.
Gotcha.
So there's not but some of these other systems, you do pay a monthly fee, but
yeah, Loop Community, I think
am I missing out on something that should I be subscribing to something that
not necessarily.
Okay.
So if you only bought a couple of tracks, there's a certain data limit that you have for your tracks. So you can use Loop Community Prime for free, but you'll only get a certain amount of gigs for your files. The more the more songs you incorporate into your song library, the more you're gonna have to save, and that's where it starts saving. Like the price starts going up. As well as if you want to do the moving around arrangements that we talked about, like right there, you won't. I don't think you'll have that option unless you pay for that. That's the main thing.
I can edit it before the fact. Like I can go in and take out a chorus and take out an extra bridge, but I don't know that I can in the moment change it.
Yeah, that's something that's specific to paying for the monthly.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, so that's the main thing. But you can, for your purposes, it still could help a lot. Just having it the way that you have it. But if you want to invest some more money into it for that feature, it could be, yeah. As for helping your drummer, buy-in is something that's really hard to do with these kind of things. But one of the main things that I've heard from people is, how did they phrase it? Giving them the bigger picture of why you're doing it helps. Not just, I think half of the time they feel like it's just like, oh, I'm capable of this. I'm a drummer. Like I know exactly how to keep time, and I'm a professional. Right. I think one of the main ways to explain it is to help grow the team as a whole, not just the individual. It's not about them. Exactly. So when it's about when you begin to explain, hey, we have some other musicians that might struggle with timing a little bit, and so for the sake of the band and growing our entire team, I want to incorporate these things for team growth and stuff like that. In the end, there are going to be people that are just going to push back no matter what you say. As long as you really cast the vision and to the best of your ability and how you want your worship ministry to grow, that's the most you can do. And as long as you communicate that, and this is something that you prayed about and sought the Lord on, and He's like, yes, this is the direction the vision that I have for your worship ministry to go in. As long as you communicate that, in the end, that's between them and the Lord at that point for how they want to take that. So,
thank you.
Yeah, of course. Sure.
What would be your first recommendation for introducing click and loop? Say a team is not used to using it, they're kind of just used to doing things, how they do it, or maybe they're transitioning but they're trying to find something that works for them, would you recommend Playback or Prime?
Oh boy.
'Cause Ableton's a little like...
Ableton is definitely a
advanced.
little bit further down the line. I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. It really depends on what they want. I would actually show both of them and be like, hey, these are both of the windows. Which one is easier for you to look at? Because some people might prefer this view. It's like, oh, it's really easy to be able to see all my tracks and their volumes and be able to see the window at the top. Or with this other with Playback, it might be easier for them to kind of see just the individual song and like see it scroll instead. So it really comes down to preference. Another really nice thing is that there's a nice fade button right here for Playback that allows the track to kind of fade out. So that's nice. So when it comes to introducing it to your team, first of all, I think the best place to do that is in rehearsal, not on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
If you do it on a Sunday morning, people are going to be like, wait, what? What's going on? What is this? When you introduce it during rehearsal, I would even just start getting the idea into their heads of being like, hey, this is a direction that we're heading in before you even introduce it spontaneously during a rehearsal, instead of just like the iPad descending from the heavens and being like, you're going to use this now. Instead, it's like, okay, we're going to introduce these in a couple of weeks. Here's some links to different ways that you can kind of get to know the program and kind of work from there, and then introduce into your rehearsals.
Got it.
Yes?
Something that we're doing to try to help the buy-in is just sending people a few links. I think Elevation does it. They've got some YouTube videos of what they're hearing, their band is hearing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they're hearing all of that, and it kind of, this is what is similar, it's going to be like this, sort of, to help with the buy-in. Because some of the folks are not quite sure what to expect. They're not sure what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so many amazing resources. I was looking at a lot of those Elevation videos while preparing for these talks, and I mean, the professionalism that they have, it gives you the best view into, hey, this is where we could be. This is how we can grow as a team. Because when you look at a team like Elevation, you see that these were people that know what they're doing, and they know how to worship and lead in a moment, and use these different tools and elements with those things. So I think being able to, definitely providing those resources and being able to show your team and show them some research into videos and showing, hey, this is the direction that we're hoping to head. It might seem like a lot at first for your team to process and to swallow. It definitely, I remember when I was in youth group, I was like, y'all are crazy for these things. I was that kid being like, this is in-ears, click and loop, what? But being, eventually you do grow into it, and the results you will see tangible results. Yes?
I have a question. So I don't have any experience, not very educated in this sense of things, but I know at my old church we had, usually the worship leader signals whether we're repeating something, the pianist, then we had a talkback mic, so then you just talk back and everyone's like, okay, we're repeating it.
Right.
So with this, does everyone have access to one of these, or is it just like one person and then they like control it?
Great question. Usually, the way that I see it is that one musician on stage has the iPad.
Okay.
If it's somebody that has a talkback mic, so when I was the person with the talkback mic on my teams, so I had the talkback mic and I also had my computer next to me to run those things. So whenever, I can use Sheridan for example, because she was one of my worship leaders, when she would be like, hey, we're gonna repeat the bridge, she would signal that to me, I would communicate that to my team, and then I would make the change on my laptop. And it's kind of like this juggling act. It can be kind of crazy. So choosing the right people in your volunteers and choosing people that are capable of these things is something that's really important. And somebody that won't get easily overwhelmed by basically playing two instruments at once, or like an instrument and a half. So it's definitely choosing the right people helps. But yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Again, doing some research, Loop Community has got these pedals that you can do, and so I've just pretty much tried to be like Grand Central. I'm playing the keyboard, I'm leading worship, I'm trying to advance.
Yep.
It's craziness, and yet I don't, just, honestly, I don't know there's somebody else on my stage that I trust that will, and so, they do have pedals, which is nice for advancing to another track.
Sure.
But truth be told, I've tried these in practice to get started, and I did one song in worship that we had worked on, but my sound guy was asleep at the wheel, and he left the click track in the
Oh
in
no.
the house, just for a moment, and I didn't even know it. It wasn't the click; it was the cue. They heard intro 2, 3, 4, and I didn't even know it happened until he heard it, muted it, but it was that had happened already,
Yep.
And so later I heard, I'm like, oh, that's awesome, that's so great.
Oh.
So anyway, but things happen,
Yep,
But,
that happens a lot.
but I'm sorry, I'm just rambling on.
No, you're
because
fine.
This is just helping me to talk about it. It's like this is like therapy.
I'm glad to help.
What my big problem is the mix. How do you get a good sound of the click and the cues without overpowering, so that you can hear like the drums and that you can hear everybody else,
Oh boy.
because you can mute some channels, but I'm just having problems with getting a good mix. How do I do that?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that is a hard
That's
question.
a big question. I know.
I mean, of course, you start with volume and choosing specifically what you want to hear. Like in my case, I was very selective with which instruments I needed to hear and which instruments I kind of didn't in the end. Obviously, you being a worship leader, that's a very different situation where you kind of want to hear everyone and everything that's going on.
You kind of do, but you can't, really. You can't.
Yeah, I would say the main thing with click is that it encompasses a certain frequency range, right? So all of the instruments that kind of are in that sphere, I would think mostly, I don't know, like guitars or something that's a bit on the higher end of the frequency spectrum. Those are the ones that you probably want to dip a little bit, as well as some of the lower end instruments like your bass or like keys a little bit. Just to be able to kind of dip those out kind of creates a more balanced sounding mix. And just knowing specifically what you want and how to allocate all of your volume and kind of do this balancing act of these are the things. These are the things I absolutely need.
Yes.
And kind of go from there.
Okay.
So
I know I asked you a question that's like probably hours long, but thank you for addressing.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Now, one thing too with that is if you have the capability of running stereo rather than mono.
Yes.
Okay, so with that, then you can, if you have the capability with your sound system, run it through stereo. Am I right in that?
I
Where
am,
you can,
and that's where he didn't mute the.
oh,
side
right,
of the house.
okay, because then
It
this
is
way you
running
can kind
stereo.
of, okay, yeah,
But yeah.
okay,
So we're supposed to hear the click.
right,
but
right,
not-
okay.
Just to let you all know, if you have other questions, you can stick around, but the next session starts in 10 minutes, so I want to give you guys a chance to...
Yeah, I'm sorry.
One question with the loops and everything, keys, with the instruments. Do you have the capability, so when you purchase these tracks and loops, do you have the capability to switch my key?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Good.
yeah.
Not that I'm looking to spend $35 on a track, that only comes with
Yeah.
the
No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Something worth mentioning...
it's just one of those, like, I don't want to have to deal with that.
No,
It's a
yeah.
lot of money, for a budget that's coming out.
Right, and I can't sing it in a key and
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I will say that Ableton is the best at that, because Ableton was literally made by two random electronic DJs in Berlin in the 90s, and their entire purpose was like, hey, I want to be able to pitch shift these tracks and change the keys of them on the fly without it sounding like a chipmunk. So the way that that technology works, and I wish that we had more time to go into Ableton and talk about that. But the way that it works, it has something called warping that allows you to kind of use your track and change the pitch and transpose. You can even change the BPM of the track without it really affecting the quality of sound. So that's something that's great. But you can do that in Prime and in Playback as well. Playback, it's a bit more challenging to do because you do have to download all of them.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure if there's a way to just buy one key. I don't think that there is. I think it's just kind of like a one thing or another.
Okay.
But with Prime, the quality of the track might not be as good, but you can literally hit a button while running the track. So if I'm running Zeal right now, we're in the key of D, right? And then I could go, and it kind of just like allows you to switch. Don't do that in the middle of a service, or it'll sound a little bit crazy. And I have done it before. So make sure you have the right key beforehand, because, or else I will be making my poor vocalist sing something in the key of D when you're supposed to be singing in C. Sheridan was in that service when that happened. Yes.
So I'm just comparing the two, 'cause I just know one side of it, but I know when you don't use this type of system, you can, for at least us, we could adjust per instrument per person, and I'm not sure about this, but this looks like it's like all instrumentalists get the same adjustments throughout their whole in-ears. Are you allowed to keep that system, but also, like, I'm confused about that.
Can you repeat your question?
So, like, in the back, you have the people who are mixing sound.
Yeah.
And per person, we can adjust instruments per person, but
Gotcha.
this looks like it's like an overall. Let's say the drums wants more piano, but the pianist wants, or the vocal, I don't know, like the guitarist wants less drum, but like it's adjusting.
Yeah, that is a possibility. One thing that you would need is an audio interface with more outputs.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
So what you can do in this system is you have, what's a good example? If I go into Ableton really fast, you have all of these instruments here at the bottom, and then you have outputs.
Okay.
Right now they're going into channels 1 and 2, so you can hear them through both of these speakers. And I have a small audio interface right here that has 2 outputs. So if you want to add more instruments, you can. If you get an audio interface with more outs, you can program from here. Instead of just seeing output 1 and 2, you can see like, oh, channel 3, you can put keys here, you can put guitar in channel 4. So that is an option that'll make your sound tech very happy if you incorporate those things. Because then instead of having control of one loop track, you have control of all the aspects of a loop track.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
And
it helps.
then, so is that only through this system? Because the iPads look like they're not as like to this level of.
You can do that in
Okay.
all of them as well. It's just the easiest example.
Okay.
But you can pick and choose through those. You do have to pay them for both programs. You need to pay the maximum premium to get that.
Okay.
But you can do it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. We are just about out of. We are not even just about. We are out of time. If you have any other questions, I'm not teaching another session, so if you want to ask a couple more questions, I can stay here. But if you, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Thanks.